Maharana Pratap of Mewar. With his very name resound the thunder of war, the rumble of battlefields.
राणा प्रताप इस भरत भूमि के मुक्ति मंत्र का गायक था। राणा प्रताप आजादी का अपराजित काल विधायक था। आदित्य तेज के वीर बाहु जो झुकना नहीं जानते थे और राणा प्रताप को दुश्मन भी अपना आदर्श मानते थे।
The mantra of freedom, the quest for liberation. Through the verses of veteran Hindi poet Pandit Narendra Mishra, we pay homage to Rana Pratap, going beyond Haldi Ghati. Haldi Ghati. Haldi Ghati. We leave behind the battlefields of Mewar and begin a new, exhilarating journey with Rana Pratap. More than 480 years after he was born in Kumbhalgarh in 1540. Rousing poetry and songs await us as we scale the heights of ancient fort cities such as Kumbhalgarh and Chittorgarh, where, believe it or not, clouds float through palaces built on hilltops. Historians stand by to introduce once bustling cities such as Gogunda and Chavand. Modern-day scientists, yes, scientists, discuss agriculture and water harvesting in the age of Rana Pratap. We come upon scholars writing on science in Sanskrit 500 years ago. We climb deep down into the mines of Zawar, where it is said Rana Pratap, his young queen and children often took shelter, crawling through rough, stony passageways with little air to breathe. Udaipur, the city of lakes, is our first port of call. Dr. Rima Ahuja, a renowned historian, is at the Shiv Nivas Palace overlooking Lake Pichola. From her book on Maharana Pratap, titled The Invincible Warrior, let's read the story of Prince Pratap Singh's coronation.
It was just hours before the full moon night of Holi, on February 28, 1572. The coronation of Prince Pratap took place in Gogunda. Even though the kingdom of Mewar was in peril and his own position to the throne was challenged, it was still regarded as an auspicious day for the 54th ruler of Mewar to begin his reign. The kingdom's Brahmin priests, Bhil tribal chiefs, and leading noblemen of Mewar anointed Prince Pratap. It was a coronation ceremony hastily performed on the outskirts of Gogunda Fort. Pratap was seated on a flattish stone that was of the right height.
मेवाड़ भूमि के आदि देव जय एकलिंग त्रिपुरारी की जय.
I have always felt the coronation scene was a harbinger of the years to come. A stone instead of a throne and being in the open. Rana Pratap would spend many years taking refuge in the hills and forests of Mewar, ruling his kingdom from there as he held out against the forces of the mighty Mughal Emperor Akbar.
While the battles with Akbar are part of folklore, Dr. Rima Ahuja now turns the pages of Vishwavallabh, a major work on agriculture. It was commissioned by Rana Pratap from his court Pandit, Chakrapani Mishra. The book is written in Sanskrit and provides a fascinating account of how water, soil, crops, trees have to be nourished for the kingdom of Mewar to flourish.
It talks about ideal gardens, so that would be like wishful thinking, but it also talks about how you can graft plants, how can you dam water, impound it. So things we now talk about, water conservation, is something that he's talking about. Now, at one level, it's just a manuscript. But if we look at it in the context of Rana Pratap, so Pratap has no idea that there will be a major Haldi Ghati, when it will be, if there will be, if there will be years of war or peace. And then post that, how soon will things be normal again? And yet, he's encouraging his people to work on things that are A, directly beneficial, B, it may not be needed immediately. So, I would like to read it as both an ideal future world, but also as Pratap's preparation for whenever there is an opportunity of peace, his people can still live by it.
An ideal world where there is peace. Does that appear like a dream world? Not to Dr. Sri Krishna Jugnu, a Sanskrit scholar, writer and teacher in Udaipur. He ushers us into Rana Pratap's eco-friendly world.
सबसे पहला प्रेम उन्होंने पेड़ों को किया. ये सबसे बड़ी पर्यावरण की चेतना में इस सेंस में कहता हूं कि वृष्टि, वायु और वन ये भारतीय धारणा में पर्यावरण के सबसे बड़े हेतु हैं. समय पर बारिश हो तो सब कुछ हो सकता है, वन बच गए तो सब कुछ बचेगा. इस मेवाड़ ने प्रताप के बाद भी उनके सपनों को अगले 100 साल तक पूरा किया और अगले 100 साल तक इस मेवाड़ में 100 तालाब बने. क्योंकि प्रताप ने सबसे पहले एक कंसेप्ट दिया और अपनी जो किताब थी अपने पंडित को कहा. हल्दी घाटी युद्ध के 1 साल बाद 1576 के बाद 77 में ये किताब सामने आती है, विश्व वल्लभ. भारत में लिखी गई किताबों में से किसी किताब का नाम विश्व पर हो, सिर्फ ये एकमात्र किताब है कि प्रताप ने अपना आईक्यू उस समय वैश्वीकरण की तरफ, ये पहला कदम था. पेड़ बचाओ कुछ सालों से रियो दे जेनेरियो के सम्मेलन के बाद हम लोगों ने कुछ ज़्यादा ही कर दिया उसको. लेकिन आप देखिए ये कंसेप्ट यदि 1577 में प्रताप के ध्यान में है कि पूरा मेवाड़ उजाड़ दिया गया है, आग लगा दी गई है जगह जगह, गांव के लोगों को अलग अलग स्थानांतरित करना, उनके साथ पेड़ लेकर जाना. ये पेड़ मेरा है, पेड़ लेकर जाना. मेवाड़ से कई सारे पेड़ ट्रांसफर हुए, मेवाड़ में कई सारे पेड़ आए भी. प्रताप ने ये कंसेप्ट दिया था कि पेड़ वो लगाए जाएं जो फलदार हों, तो वो अपने आप ही छायादार हो गए.
Rana Pratap Ka Yug, the era of Rana Pratap, is one of several scholarly works by Dr. Jugnu, tracing the contours of the life and challenging times of the Maharana.
ऐसा समर है ये, ऐसा समर है, प्यासी धरती भूखा नगर है. ऐसा समर है ये, ऐसा समर है, सबका अपना अपना भोजन, कोई निकट है कोई सोयोजन. आजादी की भूख लगी तो, आजादी की भूख लगी तो, घास की रोटी पर भी सबर है. ऐसा समर है ये, ऐसा समर है, ऐसा समर है ये, ऐसा समर है.
A song tinged with pathos and the damp air of sadness, recalling sacrifices of Rana Pratap and his family. Dr. Laik Hussain, a veteran theatre artist of Udaipur, is enacting from a play based on Azadi, written by Rizwan Zahir Usman in 1997, when the 50th anniversary of India's independence was being celebrated.
महाराणा प्रताप की देशभक्ति और बहादुरी तो थी ही, लेकिन इसके साथ में बहुत सारे पहलू ऐसे थे जिन पर भी विचार किया जाना चाहिए.
पंडित नरेंद्र मिश्र.
उनको केवल इसलिए प्रतिबंधित कर दिया गया था कि वो भील मीणों के साथ, लेकिन वो जाति प्रथा इनके हमेशा विपरीत रहे और उन्हें महल में आने के लिए भी पाबंद कर दिया गया कुछ समय के लिए.
लेकिन उसको अपने सदैव भाई माना और इस मानसिकता को उन्होंने कभी नहीं त्यागा। इसका परिणाम ये निकला कि जब विरोधी मुगल सेनाएं जब उनके करीब आ जाती थीं तो ये लोग उनके सामने और मांस की दीवार खड़ी कर देते थे, जो एक बार को बंदूक निशाने से चूक गई होगी, लेकिन भील की कमान से निकला हुआ तीर एकलव्य की तरह सही शरसंधान करता था।
We are fortunate to meet the 83-year-old Pandit Narendra Mishra at Shivnivas Palace in Udaipur, where his thoughts and words still brim with passion, undeterred by the onslaught of age and time.
तो हल्दी घाटी के संग्राम को ज्यादातर लोग मतलब ये मजहबी और सांप्रदायिक दृष्टि से देखते हैं, जबकि ऐसा बिल्कुल नहीं था। वो अपने अपने सिद्धांतों की लड़ाई थी। महाराणा प्रताप की सेना में जो तोपों का नायक था वो हकीम खां सूर था। युद्ध प्रारंभ होने से पहले जब धूल उड़ती हुई दिखाई दी, मानसिंह मुगल सेना का सिपह सालार आ रहा है, तो महाराणा प्रताप ने एक इमरजेंसी मीटिंग की और उनसे पूछा क्या करें, मेवाड़ को सरेंडर कर दें? तो एक नहीं नहीं का एक कंठ से गूंजा दुर्जय नारा और हर हर महादेव का गर्जा नवभेदी जयकारा। उसने हर हर महादेव में साथ नहीं दिया। दृष्टि उठाकर हाकिम खां को तब राणा ने देखा। मैं इस बात पर ध्यान चाहूंगा कि आप देखें कि मूल्यों की लड़ाई कैसे लड़ी जाती है और उसका क्या परिणाम होता है। मेवाड़ी सेना का नायक था पठान बलशाली, जिसके एक इशारे पर खप्पर भरती थी काली। बोला हुक्म करो मेवाड़ी मालिक, बोलो कुछ फरमाओ, वक्त आ गया है गुलाम का जौहर भी आजमाओ। बूंद तुम्हारे जहां पसीने की भी कहीं गिरेगी, कसम खुदा की वहां पठानी लहू धरा चूमेगी। बूंद तुम्हारे जहां पसीने की भी कहीं गिरेगी, कसम खुदा की वहां पठानी लहू धरा चूमेगी। है अल्लाह गवाह, जिंदगी का भी हक देता हूं, मैं जाबाज पठानों की जिम्मेदारी लेता हूं। बोटी बोटी कट जाएगी चाहे कहर फटेगा, पर इस्लामी खून जंग में पीछे नहीं हटेगा। नमक हलाली में मालिक देखो कुरान का पानी, बोल रही थी वसुंधरा के अंतस की कुर्बानी। धन्य हो गया जिस कारण कणकण हल्दी घाटी का, ये बलिदानी वज्रलेख है मेवाड़ी माटी का।
Pandit Mishra's eyes moisten as he narrates how the Rana never failed in upholding humane values in times of war and peace, especially when it came to respecting women, children and their rights.
एक बार अब्दुल रहीम खान खाना की बेगमें कुछ राजपूत सरदारों के हाथ लग गईं, तो वो उनको वहां से गिरफ्तार करके महाराणा प्रताप के सामने उपस्थित किया उन्होंने। तो उन्होंने कहा हमारी लड़ाई जो है, जो हमें गुलाम बनाने का प्रयास कर रहे हैं उनके खिलाफ है, महिलाओं के खिलाफ हम। और उन्होंने जो भी पकड़ करके लाए थे उन पर वो बहुत नाराज हुए और फिर अपने पुत्र को भेजा कि जाओ इनको वहां वापस करके आओ। आप सोच सकते हैं कि शत्रु के शिविर में पुत्र को भेजना खतरे से खाली नहीं था, लेकिन उन्होंने मानवता की रक्षा के लिए अपने बेटे तक को मतलब ये निर्देशित किया। और इसका प्रभाव अब्दुल रहीम खान खाना पर इतना पड़ा कि उन्होंने साफ कह दिया अब मैं महाराणा प्रताप के खिलाफ तलवार नहीं उठाऊंगा।
Ms. Padmaja Kumari, a daughter of the House of Mewar, welcomes us at Udaipur City Palace.
My daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, had a very interesting question. She wanted to know about his wife and she wanted to know about his mother.
If the men were engaged in battles, their women were the proverbial pillars of support.
If you narrate the story right, people understand that there were women involved in very important capacity for him to do what he did. And sometimes those roles are that of support, but it's persistent, consistent support, and that's not easy.
The answer to the question raised by Padmaja's daughter, Rohita Kumari, is found in innumerable folk songs and poetry.
कुंभलगढ़ की पुण्य धरा पर राणा ने है जन्म लिया। मातृ जलंता की कुक्षी से पुत्र रत्न ने जन्म लिया। सांगा का था पुत्र बला जिसने जग में गे नाम किया। उदय सिंह का पुत्र प्रतापी मातृभूमि को धन्य किया। कि विश्व मंच पर कीर्ति व्यापी, विश्व मंच पर कीर्ति व्यापी सिंह प्रतापी दान की। सूरजवंशी महाराणा के त्याग और बलिदान की।
To Maharani Jayavanta Bai, the mother of Rana Pratap, Madhav Dhadak's poetry is a tribute, pure and clear as the mountain air of Kumbhalgarh.
कि चेतक की चापों में खोया देख रहा छूना आसमान। एड़ी लगते ही राणा की चेतक बन गया वायुयान। ऐसा घोड़ा चेतक क्या था मानो लग रहा पुष्प विमान।
Vayuyan, sings the poet, describing Chetak flying through the air.
कि मार गिराया दुश्मन को आकर राणा को किया प्रणाम।
Dr. Vandana Singh adds a scientific and engineering dimension to the legend of Chetak.
एक हॉर्स आर्मर को ले तो उसमें एक तो वेट इतना होता था, अगर आप देखेंगे कि उसका वेट कम से कम 35 से 40 किलोग्राम का वेट होता था। तो खुद घोड़े का की कद काठी का आप अंदाजा लगा सकते हैं कि उसकी कद काठी कितनी रही होगी कि जो खुद 40 किलोग्राम का हॉर्स आर्मर पहने और उसके बाद 150-200 किलो का जो योद्धा और अस्त्र शस्त्र के साथ पहने रहते होंगे उसका वेट भी लेता था। सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट होता है बैलेंस बनाना, बॉडी को बैलेंस भी करे और साथ साथ बॉडी को प्रोटेक्ट भी करे। तो बैलेंस बनाने के लिए कि जितना आपका लेफ्ट साइड बैलेंस रहे उतना ही राइट साइड बैलेंस रहे, जिससे कि घोड़े या फिर योद्धा का कंसंट्रेशन पूरा लड़ाई में रहे। और सेकेंडली फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी, कि फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी मीन्स ऐसा ना हो कि जो भी वो योद्धा पहन रहे हो तो उसमें कुछ ऑब्स्ट्रक्शन आए। तो फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी के लिए वो छोटी छोटी चेन्स बनाते थे, आयरन के लिंक्स बनाते थे जिससे बड़ी बड़ी प्लेट्स को जोड़ते थे। और इससे क्या होता था कि जो बड़ी प्लेट्स होती थी वो उनके बॉडी के कवच का काम करती थी और छोटे छोटे रिंग्स की वजह से उसमें फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी आती थी। तो इतना ये टीडियस और लेबोरियस जॉब होता था। उसके बाद उसकी क्वालिटी मेंटेन करना कि अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ी बात है कि उस टाइम पे लोग ये अचीव कर लेते थे।
Dr. Vandana Singh is a conservator and metallurgist at the Conservation Lab of the City Palace Museum, Udaipur.
तलवार तो यहाँ की मेवाड़ की तो तलवार ही फेमस है सबसे ज्यादा। उस समय जो तलवार बनती थी उनके लिए भी एक स्पेशल जाति होती थी जिनको सिकलीगर बोलते हैं। तो उस समय जो मेटलर्जिकल एडवांसमेंट था उस लेवल का था कि लोगों को बिना इंस्ट्रूमेंट के या बिना डिग्री के वो वर्ल्ड लेवल के ऑब्जेक्ट्स बनाते थे, मार्वलस ऑब्जेक्ट्स। उनके पास कोई इतना एडवांस टेक्नोलॉजी नहीं थी, बड़ी बड़ी फर्नेस नहीं होती थी कि जिसमें लोहे को पूरी तरह से मेल्ट कर सके। कोई टेम्परेचर चेक करने की टूल्स या टेक्निक नहीं होते थे कि किस टेम्परेचर तक उसको गर्म करना है या ठंडा करना है। और कभी कभी तो जैसे अंधेरे में, जैसे अमावस की रात है तो उस समय आपको बिल्कुल टेम्परेचर का जो आग होती है उसका कलर दिखता है कि रेड है अगर आप लोहे को गर्म करेंगे। तो उससे वो आइडिया लगाते थे कि अच्छा अब ये ब्लू हो गया है तो अब हमें इसको यहाँ पे ठंडा करने डाल देना चाहिए, अब इसको टेम्परिंग कर देनी चाहिए। ये सब उनके जो नेचुरल एनवायरनमेंट था, यही उनके इक्विपमेंट्स थे, यही उनके टूल्स थे। और दूसरा उनकी जो अपनी एक्सपीरियंस था और स्किल, तो उसके बेसिस पे उन्होंने अभी तक जो ऐसे ऑब्जेक्ट्स बनाए हैं जो हम लोग अभी भी विजुअली उनको अप्रिशिएट करते हैं और देखते हैं।
Dr. Sri Krishna Jugnu leads us into the silver and zinc mines of Mewar, which the Mughal rulers were eager to capture from Rana Pratap.
प्रताप के पास जितने संसाधन थे, सबसे बड़ा काम था उनके पास जो खाने हैं वो सुरक्षित बचे। आप देखिए अकबर ने दरीबा तक की खान पर कब्जा कर लिया, जो उदयपुर से 60 या 65 किलोमीटर आगे अभी वर्तमान में हिंदुस्तान जिंक के पास है, उस खान तक कब्जा कर लिया। वो मोहिब में उसने थाना बिठा दिया, मोहिब जो पास में गांव है, कूरज में थाना बिठा दिया और वहां से वो गाड़ियां भर के चांदी ले गया था जिस पर सिक्के भी ढाले गए। लेकिन जावर जो महत्वपूर्ण था उसके पिछवाड़े प्रताप ने एक अस्थायी राजधानी बना के चावंड को और नेतृत्व संभालते रहे। आप देखिए एक दावे के रूप में प्रताप ने जावर को बचा के रखा आखिरी सांस तक।
It is time now to go deeper into the story of zinc mines with Dr. Paul Craddock, an emeritus researcher, conservation and scientific research at the British Museum, London. He has made path-breaking studies on the remains of early mining and metallurgy in India and found it was as sophisticated as any in the Western world. In the Zawar mines near Udaipur, Dr. Craddock and his team came across zinc smelting processes that had no parallels anywhere. This was the sharp edge of technical innovation. Zinc mining was taking place on a major scale, well away from Europe, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East. Dr. Craddock notes, and we quote,
"We can safely say it was the start of the Industrial Revolution in the region of Mewar, 500 years before it begins in the West. Please remember that to develop mines, whether now or 1,000 years ago, it presupposes a good working knowledge of mechanics, pneumatics, hydrostatics, and practical geology. A certain competence in mathematics would be necessary. Almost certainly those in charge of the mining operations in Mewar were literate."
Rana Pratap often took shelter in the mines of Zawar as he waged relentless battles against the Mughal Empire in the Aravalli Hills. Along with his queen, young family, and a few loyal supporters, the Rana quite literally went underground into the mines of Zawar to bide his time and attempt to rally support.
Today, villagers in Zawar still refer to one of the ancient mines as Pratap Khan, or Pratap's Mine. It is a broad flight of steps of carefully cut stones, otherwise not found in the mines. It goes down to what is still referred to as the audience chamber.
There is a Rani Khan too nearby, the Rani's Mine. Here, the women of the Rana's family, along with their children, found a safe haven. There's evidence in Rani Khan of hooks and rings, believed to be for the cradles. Dr. Craddock points out, and we quote,
"The ventilation and air currents in the mines are poor, making it a very difficult hideout indeed for Rana Pratap and his family members."
We are seated with a man of science at the City Palace, Udaipur, Dr. S.K. Sharma, who is placing Rana Pratap's contributions in a global perspective. He is the Zonal Research Director of Maharana Pratap University of Agriculture and Technology.
It is in the 15th century, 16th century, way back Maharana Pratap told, for the food security of this Mewar region, there should be a separate policy for the plain area, hill area and the mixed jungles. So I am really amazed to study all these points and realize in this region how this could happen, that many scientists now are thinking about this. The concept of the sustainable development, which the all FAO, WHO and our bigger organizations, even international climate change treaties are talking today, our great warrior leader Mahana Pratap ji has given this concept of sustainable development way back in the 1570s only. Now we are taking that our first base of the development of agriculture should be the natural resource development and ecological conservation. And it was the first point given by the Mahana Pratap in his agriculture policy that in the Mewar is a hilly region and a different kind of terrain is there. So there is a plain is there, mixed jungles or forests are there, and hilly terrain is there. Those who were on the hills, they used to do the terrace farming. Those who were on the plains, they used to have a general food grain production with the case crops and fruit crops. So they used to have the integrated farming. And those who were residing in the jungles and forests, they used to have the agroforestry systems with a suitable water conservation system. So scientifically now we call it as a land-based classified agriculture production system.
निर्मल जल सो भरिया सरवर ढेबर राज समंद पीछो लारी देख छटा माने पीछो लारी देख छटा माने आवे घणो आनंद माने प्यारो लागे छे.
We are in the city of lakes, and how can we not talk about water? And who better to explain water resources than Dr. Narpat Singh Rathore? Dr. Rathore is a former professor of geography at the Mohanlal Sukhadia University in Udaipur. In his papers, he has said, and we quote,
Udaipur is a unique example of water conservation and management anywhere in the world. The entire lake system is to be understood as micro watershed units. Geography has played an important role in these micro historical feats in Udaipur and the entire region of Mewar.
The Udaipur Basin is located on the Great India Water Divide Line at the confluence of four rivers, that is Ahad, Morvani, Amarjok and Sisarma, that flow through the well-defined Girwa region along the eastern slopes of the south-central Aravallis, one of the oldest mountain ranges of the world. Girwa means girdle of hills, and the Udaipur Basin is shaped like a saucer in a valley surrounded by the Aravalli hill ranges.
Metamorphic rocks of the region ensure that there is no underground leakage or seepage of water from these lakes.
Dr. Rathore's research reveals deeper insights into watershed management, river diversion and river linkage in the region of Mewar over the last 700 years, in which Rana Pratap plays a significant part too. From lakes to fort cities and palace architecture. Now we are face to face with Dr. Shikha Jain of the Drona Foundation, a conservation architect.
When I was looking at the Zawar mines, because Zawar was a very important place for him, actually that was one of his main resources and how he generated. But next to that, his finance minister or the Jain merchant who financed him, Bhamasha, built the Jawar Mata temple. So in the temple architecture, you can see that it's somewhat similar to the temples of Sri Eklingji, contemporary to that period. So you see similar features that were already defined in the Mewar typical architecture. You had the chhatri and the dome. You had, columns and beams as a tribute structure. What is different in his case is that you don't see too much ornamentation or carvings. They are very simple structure made with big limestone masonry and plaster work. If you go back to other constructions by Maharana Pratap, of course the main known one is Chavan, because in 1585 when he had gathered the Chappan area under him, that time he established Chavan as his capital and he created this palace there. And that palace structure itself is in ruins. It's protected under the Archaeological Survey of India. But in the remains, again, you can see similar kind of construction, the top fortifications or merlons that are typical, and solid walls, masonry walls. So overall, I would say that his architectural style at that time was very bare of ornamentation, very practical, but using the traditional masonry and construction materials that was there.
Chawand, the temporary capital of Rana Pratap, is where Dr. Reema Ahuja now shifts her focus.
Eventually, after many moves, Chawand is his final capital. I think at that point, he's a more senior man. I wouldn't use the word old. He's only 57 when he died. But he's more senior. That is probably where he thinks of a temporary capital. And that is where we probably find more of these things like orchards coming up, court poetry, court artists, both borrowing from what had gone before him. So the continuation of that tradition, adding to it, Pratap uses older places as temporary capitals. He makes newer capitals. So we then have a much more rounded picture of a man who is well trained in his own traditions, who is also then building for the future, even though the future is unknown to him. It might be something which sees stability, which we know with retrospect there is stability in that part of Mewar and overall in India. But it could have been a different picture for him. He could have died within 6 months. And yet he's building for the future.
The saga of Maharana Pratap's life and times will continue to reverberate for centuries to come. As the historians, poets and dramatists so passionately assert, the Maharana remains a fountainhead of inspiration. In his office at the City Palace in Udaipur, we meet the young Mr. Laksharaj Singh Mewar, whose family is directly descended from Rana Pratap. Through this new generation of the House of Mewar, we feel the pulse of history.
Your history is full of inspiration. One is very honored and privileged to be able to be a part of a legacy of this nature. I certainly didn't put in a request anywhere to be born where I am, in the country that I am, in the religion that I am, in the family that I am. But at the end of the day, when you do get certain things that are purely nature oriented, A, you are humbled, B, you are respectful, and C, you try and see inspiration right where you are. So all the members of the family and what they have done, I think is exceptionally important to observe that it was relevant for the time and how they managed it. And there is a factual inspiration that exists in all of those turning points in our history. And the beauty of it is to be able to share it with everybody.
Laksharaj is heading the Maharana Pratap Smarak Samiti, and his words bridge us to Chakrapani Mishra's Vishwa Vallabh.
So what we are planning to do now currently is to bring up the indigenous plants and trees of the area which are not known to a lot of people. So we're trying to bring that out there because it's right in the center. It's a very green area and we want to make sure that it remains green for the coming years as well. So the idea is that we plant as many trees as possible, and now we're going to start identifying hills, and in which we will start putting in relevant plants of our region where people can associate and bring back the right sort of greenery that is required, because these days there are a lot of plants probably growing but they are not very beneficial to the land or to the water.
कि देश के यूं को जाग उठो, अभी कर्ज चुकाना बाकी है, राणा के अरमानों का भी ब्याज चुकाना बाकी है, मातृभूमि की रक्षा हित में प्राण बचाना बाकी है, हम मिट जाएं देश मिटे ना आन बचाना बाकी है, करनी होगी हमको रक्षा भारत देश महान की, सूरजवंशी महाराणा के त्याग और बलिदान की, त्याग और बलिदान की, त्याग और बलिदान की।